We found Chaparral shortly after we got married. We were looking for a church in the community where we could be involved and plant some roots. We were driving by and thought we would check out the church. We liked the preaching and we got involved in a small group. And shortly after our son Alden was born, these were the people that celebrated with us.
Yeah, the church was a great help to us after we had our son Alden. They brought us dinners and really just helped us as we transitioned to a family of 3. And with time over dinners and parties and different life events, we've just built some great friendships here.
Each and every week as we come, our son Alden looks forward to this. He wants to see everybody that he knows and get his hugs and kisses, and he just thinks it's wonderful here.
Welcome to Chaparral. We're glad again that you're here today. If you're visiting with us, you're in the right spot. This new series we're starting is called Linked, and we're going to be looking each week at these little videos from you guys, from hearing from our stories inside our own community and how this community is shaping their lives and how we are moving forward together. Who are we and where are we headed as a community? And so we're going to hear those stories each week, something different, right from our family and from stories within our family. Now, we're going to talk, we called this thing linked because linked means things are connected, right? So when you think of linked, what do you think of when you think of linked? First thing you think of when I say linked, you think of a chain, right? Well, actually, there's a lot of different kind of chains out there. There's like, you may think of a bike chain, like you have on your bike or something like that. You may think of a necklace. That's a kind of chain. It's got little links in it. I thought of chain mail. You guys will, that soldiers wear that kind of stuff. How about a chain letter? Have you heard of a chain letter before? That's really old school, but there was these things called chain letters. This is from 1958 up here. How about a chain gang? Remember that? Those days? You work on the chain gang? A chain reaction? Like in, all that kind of, that's a mistake, sorry. Next one, supply chain. Any of you who work in business where you do supply chain management? No? Okay. My favorite, then, is this one, a chainsaw. If you need a 4-cylinder engine for your chainsaw, it's pretty bad. But the idea is that here's the thing with all these things have in common. All these things have in common is that they're linked together, right? In order to have a chain of any kind, you need different pieces that are connected. And hopefully there's some purpose to that chain. There's something that it's doing, it's producing, or it's connecting to. And most often when we think of a chain, we think of its purpose is to hold something in place. Like when I think of a chain, the first thing I think of is like a chain for an anchor on a boat. This is one of the anchors for the Titanic. Huge. I talked to John Dady last night. I asked him about, he works on a boat sometimes out in the Gulf, and they have these huge boats that do drilling, oil drilling. And he said his anchors weigh like 40,000 pounds. That's huge, right? And the links on the chain, he said, are like 250 pounds a piece. Here's a huge chain. Look at this guy. That's just huge to hold this anchor in this boat in place. Well, the thing is despite all that size and weight and power, it's only as strong as the weakest link. Right? That's all it is. It comes down to what's the weakest link in that chain. And so we're going to spend some weeks going through our story, looking at the chains we're building in our lives and asking, where is that weak link for us? Us as individuals, us as a community. Where are the weak links that we need to strengthen so we can hold on tight? And so each week we're going to be doing something a little different. I hope you make the time to be here. Our small groups will be working on these same topics throughout the week as we can really kind of dig in and try to figure out where are our weak links. What are we anchored to? And that's where we're going to start today. Because I think a lot of folks today find themselves adrift. They don't know where they're going. They're like a ship that's kind of on the ocean that's kind of just going wherever the ocean takes them. They don't know where they're anchored to. In a storm or a hurricane, they say you don't lash your boat to a dock. You take it out and you put it on an anchor in deep water because it's solid if it's connected to that anchor. We want the same thing for us. What are you anchored to? What are we anchored to when storms come in our lives? And is the chain we're anchored to strong? So that's where we're going to start today, is ask the question, what is our anchor? What is your anchor? Now, we're going to start with something very, very simple, something you probably all know, but it's a great reminder for all of us to know what our anchor is. One day, some leaders came to Jesus. They said, Jesus, I want you to boil it down for us. Well, let's look at the bottom line, basic part of what God wants from us. How do we make God happy? And he said this, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. We know that. But this one's hard. It's hard because we have to ask the question, how do we know we're loving God? How do we know we're sincere when we say that we love God with our lives? And so Jesus then goes a step further. He adds this. He said, the second commandment is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So that's the anchor. Our anchor is connected, or we're connected to this anchor here. Two commandments he gives us, to love God first, and then to love our neighbor as ourself. They're just as important as each other. But the second one is a bit more difficult in the sense that we can verify the second one. I can see by the things I do, if I love my neighbor, it shows. People can see it. I can say, I love God. Oh, I love God. I sing songs in church, right? But ever been like looking out the window, wondering when the Cubs are playing this afternoon? Why you're doing that? Or maybe you get the bumper sticker on your car that's got a little fish on it, or WWJD or something like that, but ever been cut off by a car with that sticker on it in traffic? You know what I'm saying? I mean, so it's one thing to say that we love God, but how do we show that? Well, what's the way we can really demonstrate that? But the second commandment, loving others, that's pretty tangible. That's pretty visible. People can see if I love my neighbor by what I do. So Jesus is going to tell us about that one. What do we do on Saturday night? What do we do with that person at the office that annoys us? Or at the store? What do we do when that person ahead of us in the car is texting, and the light turns green, and they're still texting, the light turns yellow, and they pull out? You've been there, right? I mean, how do we show our love for our neighbor? When and how do we know that our interests are for them and their good over and against our good? Do my attitude, does my actions reflect my love for our neighbor? So we're going to talk about that today. My favorite quote, probably one of my favorite quotes of all time, was written by a 16th century nun. So, in the 1700s, a nun from Spain named Teresa of Avila, she wrote this: the surest sign that we're keeping these two commandments, the ones we just read, is, I think, that we should really be loving our neighbor. For we cannot be sure if we're loving God, although we may have good reason for believing we love God, but we can quite well know if we're loving our neighbor. But the problem today is I think people want to separate those two. They want to talk about loving God and then loving others. Like the two are somehow unrelated. That I can love God and hate that guy at work. Or I can love my neighbor, but I don't care about God. We somehow act that these are somehow separate, but they're not. In 1 John 4:19, it says this: we love because he first loved us. So our love for our neighbor is motivated not out of some altruistic notion or just being kind. We really love, because he loved us first, is what it says. We are free to love. We are free to show compassion. We are free to put others' needs above our own because God did the same thing for us. He loved us first. And the other side is true as well. If we love God, we need to love our neighbor. 1 John 4, right after that, it says this: those who say, I love God, and hate their brother or sister are liars. For those who do not love a brother or sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. All right, so you got kind of both things working together. They're linked together in one anchor, and that's our anchor. Right? That's the basic bottom line of who we are. We love God, and because of that, we love our neighbor. We love our neighbor because we love God. They kind of go together. So we're going to start off then with our first link. How do we link ourselves to that anchor? That's where we're going to start today, these two things. We'll go back to 1 John 4:19 for a second. And these first two words, we love. We're kind of going to hover around those two words today. What does it mean to love God and love our neighbors? Because love is kind of a big word in English, right? I hope when I say I love my truck, it is different than saying I love my wife. Those should be different things. Or I love my kids should be different than I love dark chocolate almonds, which I really love. You know, those should be different kinds. So we need to talk about what does love look like. Now, in the Bible, most of you know that there are 4 Greek words used for the word love, a couple in Hebrew. But the truth is, we're not going to get a definition of love by looking at a dictionary. Oh, here's what the Greek agape means. Here's what the Greek phileo means. And kind of somehow define love that way. We need something more practical and real about what it means to love our neighbors, those people who annoy us, and to love God. So Paul does that in 1 Corinthians. He's writing his letter to a church in Corinth. And Corinth isn't much different than our world today. Corinth was kind of on this east-west trading route, and so it was very wealthy. Had a lot of people coming in and out of Corinth in the ancient world. They really had a problem with being elite. They wanted to be the best. They wanted to be like better than everybody else in the city in general. There's a lot of religions there, and everyone had different religions that were better than everybody else, and they fought over that. They liked spiritual, fancy things, and all this kind of stuff going on in Corinth. Well, that bled its way into the life in the church, and the church itself began to have that kind of problem where people would say, well, you know what? I know Paul. Oh, yeah? Well, Apollos baptized me, so I'm better than you. And you're like, Team Apollo and, Team Paul and Team this, and they all kind of fought with each other, and they weren't looking out for each other anymore. They're very divided. And so Paul's going to talk to them about how to get them back on the same page, to kind of get their heads on straight again, to be looking in the same direction, to connect to their anchor. And he writes this chapter in what now we call 1 Corinthians 13 that you've probably heard before, probably at a wedding, but it's actually a very hard passage to do. And he starts off by giving out some false anchors, some false things that they're attaching their chains to. And it begins like this. He says, if I speak in the tongues of mortals or of angels, but do not have love, like if I can say the right things, and I'm a really spiritual person, can even do spiritual stuff, but I don't have love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. It's just annoying, and it doesn't do any good. He says, if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and I have all faith so as to move mountains, I'm like a walking Google. I know everything. I know the Bible backwards and forwards, memorized all of it. I know all that stuff. He says, if I do all that but don't have love, I'm nothing. All that stuff's wasted. He says, if I give away all my possessions and hand over my body so that I may boast. I give away everything. I'm generous. I give everything away. But I do that and don't have love, I gain nothing. Because if I'm boasting about it and showing people what I'm doing, I'm not doing it because of love. I'm doing it to be recognized, to be seen. And that's selfish. I'm not caring about other people. So Paul's like, if you don't do it out of love, it's worthless. Don't even bother. But then he goes on and says, well, what is love then? Like how do you define it? Now, we're going to look at this next section, and you'd probably say, oh, I love this passage. It's so beautiful. You got to meet people on their walls at home sometimes, and you can hear it in weddings a lot. But I want to read it slowly to you, and I want you to think through it in terms of how you and I react with people. Maybe think of someone in particular and ask yourself, am I connected to what Paul here defines as love? It's going to sound a little different. You ready? All right. He starts like this, 1 Corinthians 13:4. Love is patient. Yeah. Like for me, that one's tough. I mean, it's hard to be patient, right? I think of people, I'm thinking, they're in my way. I got to get someplace. What I'm doing is more important than what they got to do. I'm busy. Don't they know that? But love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable. It is not resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. Love bears all things. Love believes all things. Love hopes for all things. Love endures all things. That's tough to live, isn't it? I look at that list and I try to think through my life. I'm like, man, I have to work on this. I have to work on this a lot. Because this defines who I'm supposed to be and how I show love to other people. Am I being rude? Am I being irritable? Do I want my own way? Right, that's tough. But that's what Paul says here love is. And there's something about all of these things that go together. They're all relational. You can't be rude by yourself. You can't be impatient by yourself. What Paul defines love as is always in relation to someone else. We need someone to be patient with. We need someone to have hope with. So Paul says community is going to be assumed. We, together, love. Now, in that community, you'll have conflict, right? He says it here. You have all this stuff he mentions is going to happen. You've seen it happen. Maybe happening now in your life. But it doesn't mean you give up and leave. You don't quit. So you have to deal with it and work together for it. Because what Paul assumes here is that we love, that community is required, and that we can't do life alone. We need each other. People need you. You need each other. In fact, the Bible has a huge problem with it. Like, what? Yeah, it does. One of the problems with the Bible is it doesn't distinguish between singulars and plurals sometimes. Actually, it's an English problem. It's an English problem. We have a problem. English has a problem. Let's put it this way. So we have a great word in English that we kicked out a long time ago. We got rid of. We said, no, I don't want that word anymore, but it's a great word. It's the word thou. Who knows what thou means? Okay, one. Okay. Good job, Tom. All right. Thou simply means you, singular. That's all it means. It's not a big, fancy King James word from a long time ago. We just got rid of it. But it's a great word. So let's say, for example, I go to my kids, and they're all sitting there, all three of them, and I say, wouldst thou goest and clean the garage? And they replied, dearest Father. Yeah, right. Dearest Father, which one of us? Because I said thou. I said one of you is going to do the garage. And they're asking which one. Now, if I went to them and said, hey, to them, you go clean the garage, meaning all of them, what would they do? They wouldn't do it. Because they'd say, they assume, well, I thought Abby was doing it. No, I thought Luke was doing it. You said Jake was doing it. You didn't tell us which one was doing it. And I'm cleaning the garage. Okay? So thou is a great word that we've got rid of. So what we do now, though, and it's just kind of funny what we do now. So what do we do now? Well, now when I want to say to y'all, want to go to the store, right? So if you're from the Northeast, you'll say uses. Hey, uses going to go to the store? Or are you from the Midwest, you'll say Ewins. Hey, Ewins going to the store? Some Midwest will say you guys. You guys going to go to the store? If you're from Texas, you'll say, y'all going to the store? Georgia, Alabama? All y'all going to go to the store? Right. We add these words, right? Instead of saying thou and you, were like, all y'all's, you and, you know, that kind of thing. So we've got to get what that works. Well, here's the thing. In the Bible, there's no distinction in English. Right? You and you is either singular or plural, and that can change how we read some texts. Take, for example, this one, 1 Corinthians 3:16. Do you not know that you are God's temple, that God's Spirit dwells in you? We read this, we go, okay, yeah, God dwells in me. So I should take care of my body. I should not eat those donuts I had for lunch because God's going to dwell in me. Those, slow me down. So we think of that taking care of ourselves, right? But actually, these are all plurals. So it really reads like this. Do y'all know that y'all are God's temple and that God's Spirit dwells in y'all? That's how this really reads. And he's talking about us. Do you know that God dwells in you together? Right? I mean, yeah, he dwells in me as well, but the way this is written is God dwells in us. Community is assumed. How about 1 Corinthians 10:13? No testing has overtaken y'all that's not common to everyone. God is faithful, and he will not let all y'all be tested beyond y'all's strength. But with the testing, he will also provide a way so that y'all can be made to endure it. And he's assuming that he's talking to all of us. Like, we read this, we think that it's about me. God will help me get through it. He's like, no, I'm helping y'all get through it. So y'all need to work together. So if John's struggling, maybe he can come to me for help or vice versa. So y'all can get through it together is what he's saying. Now, I know God helps us individually. I'm not saying that is not true at all. But the way this is written is he's talking to us, that we together are assumed to be together. We can spend all day doing this, but there's all kinds of texts just like this one that talk about us as a group. And you kind of get the point. And the point is that we love because God first loved us. He lived in a community. When Jesus came, he set the example because he came and he lived in community with people. I mean, he had his big groups, right? The feeding of the 5,000, the folks that came and heard him teach. Those big groups that we're part of as well, like those big groups at work, those big groups at school, those big groups at the gym, those big groups of people that we're with, we have community with them. We do. This group here in this room. But there's also those smaller groups where life change happens. Sociologists say that life change, learning, happens best in groups of 7 to 12. They say that in any culture, anywhere in the world, in groups of 7 to 12 is when life change happens, which is why small groups here at Chaparral are 7 to 12. Jesus had 12 disciples for a reason. He poured his life into them. He trained them. They heard him teach. They asked him questions afterwards. Hey, Jesus, what do you mean by this, that, and the other? And he'd tell them. They ate together. They slept together. They traveled together because they were a family and a community. And the same is true for us. God wants us to build our lives into small groups too. Groups of 10, 12, 15, to nurture and to grow. People that we can be transparent with. People that we can share with. People that we can be honest with. That we can share our struggles with. Because in that group, you'll find people that need you. And people in that group that you'll need. It's our own little chain gang. Right? We're kind of working like these guys, working together in these little groups to build chains that are strong. So when storms do come, we can lean on each other. Like small groups is not about Bible study. I mean, yeah, sorry, that sounds terrible. It is about Bible study. We study the Bible together. But it's about doing it together is the point. It's about how we learn together, asking questions about God together. Small groups are a place where you becomes y'all. Where you becomes y'all. Jesus, before the end of his life, he said something to those 12 disciples. In Luke 22, he says, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I tell you, I will not eat it again until all is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. That always is interesting to me. He's about to face torture, death, a cross, beatings, humiliation. All this stuff's coming fast. And he says, I eagerly desire to eat this meal with you. Knowing full well that the guys he's going to eat with are going to betray him, deny him, abandon him, hide out while he's on the cross. They're going to be gone, hiding. And still he says, you know what? I want to eat this with you. I eagerly desire to eat this with you because he loved them. He knew there'd be troubles and struggles, that they would argue. He knew all that. But he loved them. He loved them. And so he did that for them. He says, you know, you are my disciples. I'm with you. I'll be there with you afterwards. I eagerly desire to eat this Passover with you. And he says the same thing to us. Us too. He desires to eat this meal that we celebrate each week with us, where he took his body and gave it for us, a piece of bread broken and shared with disciples like us. He took a cup and he shared it with them and he shares it with you, saying this is a promise between me and you that I'm not going anywhere. That, yeah, we'll argue and struggle and have difficult times, but I'm not going anywhere. So I'll be with you. To the very end of the age, I'll be with you. And this is my promise. He eagerly desires to share this time, this meal, with you and with me because he loved us first. Let's pray together.